Well, I was down at the Whidbey Institute on Whidbey Island in Puget Sound. That's the body of water that leads to Seattle, the Great Salish Sea, as many of us call it. And I was in the men's washroom at Whidbey the first evening, and I saw a sign that said this: employees must wash hands. If an employee is not available, please wash your own. That's hilarious. What a great, you're so tired of seeing employee must wash hands. If an employee is unavailable, please wash your own hands. I just thought that was brilliant. Well, today's scripture starts in an argument about washing the hands. Pharisees, and it says, and some of the scribes. The Pharisees and some of the scribes who had come from Jerusalem complained about the disciples of Jesus not washing their hands. You see, it's not actually in the books of Moses. It's not in the Torah that you need to wash your hands. But there was other oral traditions, other oral laws that came from the elders. That's why they mention it, not the laws of Moses, but in the traditions of our elders, they say. And these are oral, religious, new laws, some would say, from the elders about washing your hands. But those oral traditions were very specific to certain groups. And so some groups of certain strata of life would have these oral traditions and laws that made sense for them. And these people would have new oral traditions and laws for them. And so the Pharisees had hand washing, and in fact it says pots and bronze vessels, as part of their oral tradition. And, Pharisees were part of a religious community, and they were faith leaders, and they would have touched a lot of people and probably served and had food prepared and all that kind of stuff that happens in a religious community. And so washing hands, very good idea, Pharisees. Some would say ahead of their time. But they point out that Jesus' disciples do not wash their hands before eating. And in some ways, the Pharisees are pointing out that Jesus' followers are from a lower, less clean class of people. You see? They're talking about washing their hands, but what they're really saying is those people are part of us, the religious elite. In fact, they may have been pointing out the fact that Jesus himself was from that lower strata. And I've said before that Jesus most likely there was the three classes of peasants, and he was in the middle class, the people who worked with their hands, carpenters and fisher people and this kind of stuff, weavers and all that sort of stuff. Not the lowest of the peasants, that's the untouchables. But Jesus was just one level above, we think, and so were his disciples. And so they're pointing to the disciples, but I have a feeling the Pharisees were always pointing out that Jesus wasn't of the religious class, the priestly class, the prophetic class, the holy class. How did he have this authority in these teachings? His disciples don't even have holiness about them and cleanliness. They don't even wash their hands. So it's a jab trying to bring them down. Now, surprisingly, Jesus doesn't challenge the clean, unclean belief system of his family of faith, the faith of his birth. Remember, Jesus lived and died a Jew. He doesn't challenge the piece about unclean or clean and the washing of hands, which may surprise us, but it was a deep theology, and I just want to make sure we remember that clean and unclean in the Jewish faith is not the same as sin and damnation in the Christian faith. We kind of took some ideas and ran with them in a real absolute way. That's not the Jewish belief. He doesn't address the merits of hand washing or not hand washing. The Pharisees were simply protecting their positions and the religious communities from disease, they thought. But Jesus quickly turns this into a lesson about the law, about wielding the law in a way that hurts relationship. As one great writer, Angela Dinehart Hancock, said this week, as far as he's concerned, the infection is real, but Jesus insists it's not contagious. Rather, we might say our heart problem is genetic. So he knows that the Pharisees are worried about one type of contagion and disease, but he turns it quickly to a disease of the heart that they have, and he knows it isn't contagious, but may just be a genetic problem with all of us. We have a real way of turning our desires into God's desires. Jesus challenges them. and finishes by saying, you are teaching human precepts as doctrines. The stuff you think is right in life, you've turned into theology. Now, in Jewish law, being unclean or clean, or to defile, as Jesus later says, means a barrier to being in community. So if somebody was unclean, it was a temporary thing. Hadn't washed their hands? Well, wash your hands. Menstruating women, as we talked about a few weeks ago, where there was a bath of cleanliness, a mikvah, afterwards to become clean again. It wasn't damnation. It wasn't eternal. There were many things. You had a little bit of seafood, a little bit of shellfish by mistake one day from the market or something, or you just kind of had heard lobster's really good. The book of Leviticus says, no, you're unclean. But there would have been a ritual for becoming clean again. You spilled blood on the battlefield, unclean. But there was a way to purify yourself afterward. All of these laws lived and breathed and moved through the whole Jewish community. And they were always temporary, even though for a moment they held you out of community. Jesus gets right to the point. What truly defiles? Because you're always talking with your lips the laws of God, and you praise God, but with your hearts, you're acting the opposite way, he says to these Pharisees. Jesus lists the things, just makes that classic list that scares us all. We're all indicted. He makes a great list of things that defile, that come out of our mouths and from our hearts, not the stuff that's going in. He says, it doesn't matter what you eat or what comes into your mouth. That doesn't defile. It goes out to the sewer. Very practical, Jesus. It's the stuff that comes out of our hearts, through our hands in action, and through our mouths that can defile. And he gives you the list, and we all just cringe. Fornication, theft, murder, adultery, avarice, wickedness, deceit, licentiousness, envy, slander, pride, folly. We're there. Jesus has our ticket. We can read the first, fornication, theft, murder. No, I never done that. Right? Adultery, no, that's not me. And then it gets in avarice, wickedness, deceit. Oh, okay, maybe deceit. Licentiousness, I don't even remember what that is, but I think it might be me. Envy, slander, pride, folly. It starts with the big stuff and gets into the stuff that most of us have had a part in. Pride and folly. Pride goeth before the fall, it says in Proverbs. We're all indicted. These things that come from the heart, they're all things that can break relationship. That's what Jesus says is the most important. This is not a lesson, just for the record, about what silly Jewish people thousands of years believe. And thank goodness Jesus taught us better. It's not that. Because keeping the letter of the law and not the spirit of the law is a well-known practice in every religious community. We love to take current morals and put it into religious form. There was a time that women weren't allowed to show their ankles in public. Well, they backed that up with religious law. Oh, there was a theology. People could find it for you in the Bible. Right? We've done it with everything that society doesn't like at any particular time. I don't know, there's a list. Teetotaling, right? There's a good one. It's not wrong to teetotal, just for the record. My grandparents were teetotalers. They might be ashamed of their grandson, but anyway, they were teetotalers, and that's good religious practice. But there's been a time where he put that on other people as if it was God's own, God's law. How we dress, wearing hats in church, not wearing hats in church, getting gussied up, not coming in jeans. It's amazing the stuff that we can make into God's law. Well, this week a hot one has arrived, and it's just amazing. This is the Spirit of God that Margaret had this great minute for mission about iridescence? Iridescence, thank you. Which is a series of readings and plays and poems about the issue, we called it, 1988, where the United Church of Canada voted to say all people are members, full members, and therefore could be ordained. Because this week, I don't know if you saw the news, Grosvenor Park United Church asked City Council They wrote him a big letter saying, we'd like City Council to ban conversion therapy in Saskatoon. Conversion therapy? We don't talk about that out loud in the Christian church. Well, not in our Christian church. But here's a really great example, folks, of the kind of stuff that made some people uneasy in days gone by, turned into moral code, and then got backed up wrongly by biblical readings. The United Church has been on this path since the 60s, trying to correct society's view of Scripture. Hardly anybody in the other Christian churches is listening. Conversion therapy is the awful practice of taking gay and lesbian people, transgendered people, and trying to force them back into normality. You know what normal is? It's a setting on the dryer. That's what Reverend Deb always says. You know what normal is? It's a setting on the dryer. That's it. It's the only time normal makes sense. It's the practice of using spoken therapy, community pressure, group pressure, and sometimes medication and electric shock therapy to condition a person from their natural gender identity or sexuality back to what society, some of society says, is normal. And it's happening here in Saskatoon. I Googled it. They're not on the internet. Not as much as you'd think. I wrote, gay conversion therapy on the Google, and a whole bunch of counselors came up that it said said gay and lesbian counselors. I don't know, on Google, that's the list came up. Psychology Today had a list of counselors in Saskatoon. And I read each one, and one or two of them said LGBTQ2 as safe. But then as you got a little lower on the list, there were people with something called a Master's in Counseling from Briarcrest College. That's religious counseling, my friends. And I'll offer pastoral care, folks, but religious counseling just bothers me because it smacks of knowing what God's laws are and helping you with those laws, fall into line with those laws. Of course you're suffering. You're not following God's laws. Let me counsel you. Let me convert you. And now, I don't go on the record saying Briarcrest Seminary is about conversion therapy. That's not necessarily true. But I was interested in what Google produced. It's here in the city, conversion therapy. There are groups. There are Christian counselors. There are Christian faith communities who are financially supporting conversion therapy. In fact, I learned a few years ago that the Salvation Army Red Kettles in America, haven't proved it in Canada yet, some of that funding goes to conversion therapy programs. They're a church, Salvation Army, don't forget. They're an army of salvation. Now I'm really in trouble. Briarcrest Salvation Army. We need to pay attention. Nowhere in the Bible does it say change these people or change those people. All I read in the Bible is live with your neighbor, love your neighbor, live with your neighbor, love your neighbor. No conversion. No power play. No death dealing. No character oppression. These lessons from Jesus are a sharp indictment of what all of us love to do. What's coming out of your mouth? What's coming out of your mouth and from your heart? Is it judgment or is it love? Is it a yes towards relationship or is it a hard no? Is it a yes to life or a quick and simple and somewhat comfortable no thanks? What are you doing that breaks relationship because of something that was taught to you by your grandmother or that person's grandmother or your auntie or a religious leader or a preacher on TV? What are you doing, living, saying that breaks relationship with people who need God's love because of something the Christian church taught you to question and judge? It's a sad fact that the Christian church in society continues to be known for whom we judge and whom we hold out. Oh, they love to call us hypocrites. They love to call us hypocrites. The church that gets press in this world because it's juicy stuff are the judging churches, the negative churches, the grumpy churches. That means, folks, we need to double down. It means we first have to make sure we are loving as large as we say we believe God has called us to love. And second, we need to preach it. We need to tell people about it. We need to share the story. Okay, if you're not ready to preach, share the story. Tell your friends what God is doing in your life. Tell your friends a good thing that happened at Mayfair United Church. How many people are going to tell your friends about the kits we made? Not out of pride. That's on the list. Yes, it's on the list. Not out of pride, out of sharing a better story that most of us hear every single day about the Christian church or about the world. What's coming out of your mouth? Is it judgment? Is it relationship breaking? Or is it the good news? Is it the different story? The better story? The story of God's love? The story of Jesus, who called us all in our immense fallibility, in our immense humanity, in our immense uncleanliness, to get it right one more time, to fall open to one another, and to love anew. Amen.